We're back. This is Rose Unplugged. Joining me this morning is the founder, president, and CEO for the Center of Security Policy. He's also the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy under President Ronald Reagan. His book is War Footing, 10 Steps America Must Take to Prevail in the World for the Free World. Please welcome back to the show, one of our favorites, Frank Gaffney. Good morning, Frank. How are you?
I'm great, Rose. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. All right, so, oh my gosh, there's so much to talk to you about. Where to start? Okay, one of the things that you've recently written about was Mueller, and that you feel that he has been absolutely compromised by the recent information we've been getting on Clinton and Russia and that collusion, which seems to be a real collusion, whereas there's none that we can find where Trump is concerned. What are the chances now? I mean, it seemed to me, Frank, that right on cue, baby, right on cue, Mueller comes out with these indictments just when we're learning about Uranium One, just when we're finding out about who funded the who funded the dossier. We're finding out that not only did Hillary's campaign and the DNC, but now also Obama's campaign organization, all paying Perkins Coie for legal services. That's all we know about that. And suddenly, as if on cue, Mueller says, he leaks. Somebody leaks that we're going to have indictments on Monday. And they do. I just feel that this is something that he's had to have known about for a very long time. And suddenly the feds have been watching Manafort's transactions for years. That's why they got Trump and he parted company. They could have indicted him at any time, but they decided to do this now.
Yeah, let's unpack that. There clearly have been grounds for prosecuting Paul Manafort for years on a whole host of things, the least of which is frankly this failure to register as a foreign lobbyist, almost entirely unenforced statute, by the way. But I think there's no question. It sounds perhaps conspiratorial, but it certainly doesn't seem to me to be an accident, comrade.
Okay.
The Soviets used to say that Mueller had to crank up the evidence that he's doing something useful at a moment when increasingly it's obvious that what he has previously done, as the FBI director most especially, was to look the other way on real evidence of collusion between Hillary Clinton and even, it appears, perhaps to some extent, the Obama administration more generally, with the Russians in ways that had actual and very material damaging repercussions for the U.S. national security. So I think he had to step up his game. It's all that everybody's talking about now, and so it turns aside, or at least deflects attention from what I think has to be examined at least as aggressively, and presumably by another special prosecutor because of his own involvement in the cases of the Uranium One deal, for one thing, and I think probably as well something that's gotten practically no attention at all, Rose, and that's something called Skolkovo. Your listeners may be familiar with it, but the short form of it is that one of the other things Hillary Clinton did when she was Secretary of State was facilitate the transfer of immense amounts of American technology, including dual-use technology, to the Russians, and furtherance of setting up, as part of the Great Reset with Russia, a kind of Silicon Valley outside of Moscow. And the Army and Air Force in the period were warning that this is an overt technology theft operation. But it seems like Uranium One to have benefited the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
Some of the people involved gave her money. So, I mean, this is the sort of thing we have to get at. I think we're going to have to get at it through somebody other than Robert Mueller, though.
It's going to have to be. I mean, let me ask you this, Frank. Is it possible that Mueller hastily threw this together, this indictment? Because as Andrew McCarthy has even suggested and others, there's a whole lot of nothing here as well. Is it possible that he just threw it together that quickly or hastily that it's maybe weak when you really pull it apart and look at the counts?
Well, look, Andy McCarthy is my leader on all of these things, matters of national security and the law. I don't know that it was hastily thrown together. I think what they've done was they've laid out part of what they are working on with respect to these guys. I think the haste may have come with the decision to roll out what they did at this particular moment in time.
Right. Now, I saw a CNN story during the break, and they are just beside themselves. They were so excited because, they think that that the White House should be very afraid, and this is just the beginning. And then at the very end, they say, but even though there really hasn't been anything proven, in terms of a Russian connection with this and this president, but it just seems to me that they can't let it go. I don't know if you watched that press conference yesterday and Huckabee Sanders did an amazing job, but they still, the media still wanted to bring it all back to, this is still proof that there is something going on between Trump and Russia. And I can't take it anymore, Frank. I just can't take it anymore. I've heard enough.
Well, you may be a candidate for therapy, Kate,
I think I am.
You're likely to get a lot more of it before this is over. But look, the thing that's more infuriating to me than the predictable,
media
focus
response
of these guys on this issue or this particular set of developments is the complete determination of the mainstream press, it seems, with a couple of notable exceptions. The Washington Post did one thing, I think the New York Times did another, but by and large, there's nothing remotely like the kind of coverage being given
Not at all.
to, as we've been discussing, the actual collusion
right.
with the Russians, again, of a very detrimental kind for our national security, conducted by Democrats.
Let's go back to what you said about Mueller and how he's been compromised and how he needs. How could this possibly work out, Frank? How does it work out? I mean, does he? I don't believe that he would resign. Would he? Would he? Would the president come out?
He's just going to. My guess is he's just going to stay in his lane and keep beavering away at this. Though somebody pointed out to me this morning that it is interesting that Tony Podesta resigned yesterday from his firm, suggesting that he also is feeling the heat on this failure to register as a foreign agent because he was working for Manafort.
Yes,
at the time. So that may mean that there is going to be some element of the Democratic apparatus that is going to come under scrutiny from Mueller. But my guess is that he's going to have to recuse himself from the sorts of things that we're discussing here that do need to be investigated.
Right.
For example, the fact that the FBI had an active investigation going on of corruption involving at least Hillary Clinton's circle, if not she herself, in connection with this Uranium One business. That he can't possibly investigate that. Somebody else does need to do so, though, I think.
Yeah, but isn't he to some degree complicit in all of that? Having been at
there is the question as to when the voting was being done to allow the transfer of 20% of America's uranium stocks to a Russian company, and the FBI knew that there was criminal activity underway associated with this transaction, and nothing apparently was said by Mueller, apparently also by Eric Holder, who was not only the Attorney General at the time, and of course, Mueller directly reported to him, but he was also one of the guys voting for this transaction on something called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. So this is a scandal on multiple levels, and I think that Bob Mueller is going to have to be held accountable for it, not asked to investigate it.
But should he continue then on an investigation, even though he's staying in his lane? Should he even continue where he is right now?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think it's an entirely reasonable one to ask. I think just as a practical matter, the wagons have been circled around him so tightly that anything short of him voluntarily resigning is unlikely to be accomplished.
Okay, the FBI informant. You were talking about this active investigation that was going on where Uranium One was concerned, and the gag order that has been on this FBI informant has been lifted. So is that a first step towards another investigation where Uranium One is concerned, and perhaps even the dossier at some point?
Oh, no question about it. And that is going to take place on Capitol Hill, for sure, Rose.
Yes.
It's underway now.
Okay.
And I think the fact that the guy has been allowed finally to come forward with his evidence and testimony is going to really open that up as it needs to be.
All right. And what do you think about when you heard about Hillary's campaign, the DNC and Obama's campaign organization, OFA, all making payments to this Perkins Coie at the same time, very same time in the spring of 2016, and it was listed only as legal services and nothing more, no more specific than that. Isn't that alarming to you, or doesn't that cause your eyebrows to raise just a little higher, Frank?
Well, again, if I were surprised that the Democrats were engaged in these kinds of dirty tricks and trying to, conceal what they were up to and hiring foreign nationals, including Russian intelligence operatives, we believe, to manufacture evidence against, their political opponents, I guess I might have had an eyebrow raised, but that doesn't surprise me in the least. The only surprise, frankly, is that it's taken this long for it to come out.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
That is a function, again, of the lack of, investigative activity, not just by the press, by the way, but by the Congress as well. I mean, these guys have been almost entirely out of business in terms of the sort of oversight that they should have engaged in for quite some time now. And I put that squarely at the feet of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell.
And lastly, on that subject, because a lot of election law experts are divided on what crimes, if any, Hillary Clinton's campaign might have violated when that money went to hiring Christopher Steele and compiling what they did on Donald Trump at the time. But if the DNC and the Hillary campaign funded research that was conducted in a foreign country, Russia no less, that should be a violation of some sort, shouldn't it, in your opinion?
Well, I would defer to Andy McCarthy
and
lawyers on this one. It's my understanding that there's at least one law that prohibits that kind of activity in terms of federal electioneering, but I would defer to them.
All right. Listen, Frank, one more thing, too. I just wanted to speak real quickly. We only have a couple of minutes. Darn it. I want to speak about North Korea. I know that Mattis was there in South Korea, and then Donald Trump himself, President Trump, is going to be traveling to South Korea. I understand he's leaving on Friday for a 12-day trip. First of all, is that even safe for him to visit South Korea?
Well, there is the possibility that harm could come to him. I don't think there's any getting around it. That's something that the North Koreans have done to people in South Korea before, and particularly if he were to muster out to the demilitarized zone, they have killed Americans up there before. Whether they would do that in this case or not, I have no idea. I think it unlikely, but I have the feeling that he's going to exercise care about his travels in that country. But the bigger point that you're making, really, Rose, is that the North Koreans are very much our enemies and must be regarded as such. And this idea that we can continue doing as Barack Obama did famously with so-called strategic patience to allow this threat to metastasize is crazy.
And you talk too, real quick, we only have like 2 minutes left here. You talk too about your concern for the thousands of family members of our military personnel who are currently living in South Korea.
Well, I did. It's a question not just of their physical safety, but it's the fact that they are being used as hostages, effectively. If they're there, they pose, sort of human shields for this regime in North Korea. So I agree with a good friend of mine, the former commander of the Pacific Fleet, Admiral Ace Lyons. We got to get those dependents out, and that would send a very powerful signal to the North Koreans that we're serious about this, deadly serious about this.
Frank, we love having you on the show. Your website is securefreedom.org. Your Twitter is at Frank Gaffney, and your book is War Footing, 10 Steps America Must Take to Prevail in the War for the Free World. Frank Gaffney, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We always love having you.
Thank you.
All right,
Happy
take
to do
care
it.
now. We'll be back with more Rose Unplugged right after this.